In this demo, we're going to show how you can use Nutanix Calm to orchestrate object provisioning in Cisco ACI. So first, a bit about our lab environment. So here we can see that we are connected to our ESXi cluster running on Nutanix, which has 3 hosts in a single block. We can see in our vCenter that the hosts have been put into an HA and DRS cluster, and that they are running the vCenter server appliance, which we're looking at now, the Prism Central VM, which contains the Calm orchestration engine, and the Cisco ACI simulator version 3.2-4D. We can also see the CVMs, which run the Nutanix software on each one of the hosts. From a networking perspective, we have a DV switch, which is ACI managed, which currently doesn't have any port groups other than Quarantine, which is a default ACI port group. And if we look at our Cisco ACI APIC, we can see that the topology is fairly simple. In the simulator, we have a single APIC controller, 2 simulated leaf switches, and 1 spine switch. And right now, other than this fabric discovery, there's no custom tenant defined. Common management and infra are default tenants defined in Cisco ACI. Okay, so if we now look into Calm, we can see that we have a blueprint which we call the Cisco ACI automation. It has a single service in it which matches our Prism Central VM. So if we look at that VM definition, we're actually telling it that this is an existing machine and pointing to localhost. It has a single application profile, which is the default application profile. And in it, we've defined a number of variables. Some of them are runtime enabled, which means that they can be changed when the blueprint is launched in the marketplace. So here we see we have an ACI tenant name, which we're going to call Calm by default, but that can be changed at runtime. We have put in the ACI APIC IP address so that we can change it easily here. We have the project ID, so our project is going to be called Project Alpha. We have a subnet, which is required when creating the ACI objects. At some point, we got to put a subnet into the bridge domain. So obviously here in production, we would get this from some kind of IPAM, right? We have an application name. Here it's going to be called App1 within Project Alpha. And we have an application tier, which here is called Web. Here we're also specifying the DV switch, which matches the VMM domain name within the Cisco ACI APIC. We can easily figure this out as well with API calls if we wanted to, so that we don't have to hard code this into the blueprint. Right, so it matches that name here. Okay, if we look at our service, it has a number of packages, so let's see what it will do. Right, so those packages are all eScripts, which means they're Python code, essentially, that runs within the service. So here, Prism Central. And we can see that we can grab values of variables which are defined in the default application profile to reuse them into the code. So here, for example, we grab the APIC IP, the username, password from credentials defined within the blueprints, the tenant name, then we log into the ACI, get the cookies back, and then make the create tenant, for example, in that script. That's the create tenant script. Post REST method call, so that it will create the tenant, and then we print the results. And we have other calls to create the VRF, the bridge domain, the subnet, the application profile, the EPG, and then a final one to associate the EPG with the VMM domain so that the port group that matches the EPG will be automatically provisioned onto the distributed vSwitch in vCenter by the Cisco ACI APIC. Alright, so if we launch that blueprint, we see that we have to give a name to the application instance. And this can be anything, but I'm just going to use something, I don't know, ACI test 30, for example. So Now here, if I wanted to, I could change the tenant name. I'm going to keep calm. I could change all those variables that are runtime enabled. I could change them here if I wanted to. I can see the defined credentials. So here, for example, that's the ACI user. The password is masked, and I can't really see it because obviously, I don't want users to see that password. Okay, let's create the application instance. So essentially, when we click create, now it's going to resolve all those variables, with their values, and then run all the scripts that we saw that were defined into the Prism Central service. So the feedback that we get is essentially from the audit tab. It's slightly delayed as to compared to how fast it actually runs. It's because, again, we gotta fetch status and then put them into this web page and refresh and so forth. So once this is run, we'll make sure to look at the status of all those tasks, and then go into the ACI APIC controller, make sure that all the objects are there, and then finally go into vCenter and see if our port group was created on the DV switch. So for each task, we can see the status code. So 200 for the ACI API is a successful return code. Okay, so we can see that it has created all the objects. Let's go to the APIC and double check. So if we now go into our tenants, you can see our count tenant, which was created. In here we can see our VRF, which matches our project name. You can see our bridge domain with the subnet associated to it. Our application profile for app1. Within it, the web tier application EPG. And if we look at the topology of that application profile, we see that the web tier EPG has been associated with the VMM domain. So if we now go into vCenter, you can see that a new port group was created, which matches the EPG name. This is the naming convention for the Cisco ACI port groups, and the way it provisions them into vCenter, right? So you can see the tenant name, the application profile name, and then the EPG name.